first guest I have, because I will waste no more time talking, is Sidsel Bech-Petersen from Doc Aarhus, Doc 1 Aarhus in Denmark. And Sidsel and I met, I think, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when they were planning their fabulous new library that's now being built. And we started with, I think, the Village Square that you came with, a sort of program to get to know what the library of the future would look like. Very happy to have Sidsel here, and I give her the floor first. Sidsel, please give her one hand.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to come here today. We have known you, Eric, for many years, and we have also been inspired by many Dutch libraries for our innovation work, so it's great to be here and see some familiar faces in the audience, so thanks for that. I'm here to tell you something about design thinking as a framework for innovation. I've been working at Aarhus Public Libraries for the past 13 years as a library transformer, so trying to think about how can we transform libraries and supporting the innovation projects that we have in Aarhus. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how Doc 1 was a burning platform for us. Doc 1 is the new main library in Aarhus. I'm going to tell you something about the Design Thinking for Libraries toolkit and how it has become a framework for innovation for us. And then also a little bit about why design thinking. Could have been many other approaches, but why design thinking? Then a little bit about design thinking and how it looks like in action, and some lessons learned. So this is Doc 1, the new main library, or new. It opened 3 years ago, so still a little bit new. The new main library in Aarhus. This is the main library, and we also have 18 branches throughout the city. It's a city of about 350,000 inhabitants. But Doc 1, the process about preparing and creating Doc 1 started almost 15 years ago. And so it was like a burning platform for us, because we knew that to create a library like this, we had to rethink what a library is. And right from the beginning, it was a very, very strong vision that this should be a library for people and not for books. So we knew that we had to figure out how can we involve the people, the citizens and partners, politicians. How could we involve them in the process of creating Doc 1? So we started out looking at what methods could we use. We looked at participatory design, user-centered design, things like that. This is a picture from the old main library. So back in 2004, we created this space at the old main library to have a space for prototyping, so a space where we could test out things for the new main library. So in this space, we had all kinds of different prototypes, new technologies, where we invited the users to come in and join us in testing out things. So this was an invitation for the citizens and for the city to take part in creating the new library. And it was also a way of showing our colleagues and all the staff members in Aarhus that this library is actually going to change, and you're going to be a part of it, because you're going to test out prototypes in this space. So in this picture we are testing out, this is actually the information desk, or a very early prototype of the information desk in Doc 1. So testing out some service design around that. We also tried out all kinds of different methods. The village squares was one of them, but also different kind of workshops. This is a workshop for children, trying to bring in the citizens and let them be a part of the process. Then at one point in 2013, we got a grant from the Gates Foundation. This is from the announcement in Chicago. So we got a grant together with the Chicago Public Libraries, because the Gates Foundation could see that this thing about involving the users and the citizens when you are rethinking libraries, and also the thing about you have to know about your community when you make libraries and create library services. So they could see that there is a need for these kind of methods of involving the users throughout the library field. So they gave us the grant to figure out how could we come up with a global innovation model, some kind of model that could help libraries all over the world to involve the users. And with this grant, we got some consultants from IDEO, and IDEO is a very famous design thinking company. So they have helped big companies all over the world to figure out how to involve the users when designing new services and products. So we got engaged with them and started to talk to them about how could libraries do design thinking. So how could design thinking become a tool for libraries? And the end result of that process was the toolkit that's available at designthinkingforlibraries.com. It's a toolkit, it's also a quick guide that can help everyone start thinking about how to involve the community. And it's for libraries, yes, but it's actually also relevant for all kinds of organizations that want to start working this way. Since it was released in 2015, it has been translated into 12, 13 different languages, and I just learned today that the Dutch translation is also coming, so that's really, really great. But it's also just to say that this thing is spreading throughout the library field, and lots of libraries are starting to use design thinking as a way of working. So just to sum up the process for us in Aarhus, we have been having a long process of creating Doc 1 as the new main library. There's been lots of prototyping and testing out, and then at one point we got the opportunity to do this Design Thinking for Libraries toolkit, and it has now become kind of the basis and the core of all the innovation work that we do in Aarhus, because we could see that in our early processes. We did a lot of great things, and we prototype and we had workshops with the users, but we didn't have a language about how we did this. So it was not random, but sometimes it was a little bit random what kind of methods we pulled down, and let's do a workshop with children, let's do a village square, let's do this. But the Design Thinking for Libraries toolkit helped us kind of create a shared framework throughout the organization to talk about innovation. So now we have like a language to talk about what kind of phases are we in, what are we going to do, what methods should we use. So that has really helped us a lot to have this fundament for our innovation work. But why did we then choose design thinking as an approach? You could also, it has so many different names, you could also call it participatory design and user-centered design, human-centered design. Well, we chose design thinking as a framework because it's very, it is a framework and it's very flexible, and you can also bite-size it. So you can use it for a microprocess, just for a small thing that you do in your everyday work, but you could also use it for big processes that last for many years and that end up being, for example, a new main library in Aarhus, as we have. Then we also chose design thinking because it's very much about accelerating innovation. So it's called design thinking, but it's actually very much about doing things. So the motto is talk less, do more, and that's part of the mindset in design thinking. We also chose it because it's about putting people first, so it's very well aligned with the values of libraries, because we think libraries are about people. So it put people first, and you look at what people say and what they do, but you also dig into what they think and what they feel. And then we also chose it because we think that everyone can become a designer. So it's not everyone who could learn the skills of an architect or an engineer, But the skills of a designer, maybe we cannot become designers, all of us, but we can learn a little bit of their toolbox. So we can learn a little bit about how could we observe people, how could we interview people to get more knowledge about their needs. So that's kind of the core idea in the toolkit, that everyone can learn a little bit of this. And how does it look like in action? In action, you could see that design thinking is very much about designing with the people and not just for them. And it can look, there are so many different models. If you just, this was just a very quick search in Google, just showing that there are so many different frameworks for design thinking. So there are many different ways you can approach it. We have chosen this one in the toolkit to show that there is a starting point where you get some inspiration, you go out and learn about the world, then you make some ideation. This is where the brainstorming, the creativity, thinking out of the box, and then some iteration where you prototype, you analyze, look at what have we learned, and you build a prototype on that. So just to show a few pictures of how it could look like when you go out and learn about the world. When we do that, we go to, for example, we go to people's homes to do interviews. That was kind of a new thing for us. Previous on, we often invited people to come to the library to take part in a workshop or test a prototype. But when IDEO got engaged in developing the toolkit, they told us, no, you have to start somewhere else. You have to go to people's homes to do interviews. So when we start a project, we typically go to people's homes, we do an interview for an hour or so, and then we ask if they could show us around in their home and tell us about the things they have. So this is some other users we have been visiting. We often ask them to show us some of their technologies, what are they interested in. We often also bring some concepts that we have thought about, could be new library services, put them on the table and then ask them to give us their immediate feedback. So what do you like and what don't you like? And often we have to ask them explicitly to tell us what they don't like, because often they really like libraries and they want to tell us all the good things that we have come up with and really support us. And then after that we ask them, well, could you please tell us what you don't like about this? Okay, and then suddenly you actually learned a lot about how you could improve this service. So learning about the world could be go to people's homes to do interviews, but it could also be to go to some other places that have some of the same challenges as libraries. So for example, it could be shops like this who could somehow inspire us to a new library service. So when you have been out, and that's a big part of a design thinking process, is actually this thing about seeking inspiration for your design. And then you go back and you have some ideas, you work in your design team, you analyze it, you have brainstorms where you cluster and find themes in all the things you have learned, come up with some new ideas. And then you go to the phase where you are starting to prototypes and make the ideas real. And in the beginning, it's very simple prototypes. So it could just be like this. This is from our colleagues in Chicago. A really simple prototype, just sketch on a piece of paper. So this is an idea for a new library service that you could actually bring to the users to get some feedback. Like they do here at Doc 1. Also, again, very, very simple prototypes. Different concepts, and you get some feedback, and then you can start iterating on that, making a bit a more advanced prototype. You test it again, and it's very important to say that prototypes are not like, it's not, when you test prototypes, you should remember that you're not a salesman. You should think of yourself as an anthropologist. So you should use these prototypes to learn more about the user's needs. And a few examples from some of our recent projects in Aarhus. You could use design thinking for almost anything. You could use it for if you need to rearrange the physical library. You could use it for new digital services. You could use it for new services. So we use it for all kinds of different things. One of the recent projects is called non-readers. So it's actually an example of a project about some of the citizens that we don't see at the library. So in Denmark we have a lot of non-readers, people that don't read of different reasons. Maybe they can't read, maybe they have dyslexia, maybe they just forgot to read. Adult people that just don't read anymore. So we don't see them at the library. Some of them even have a kind of a library trauma because they don't think that libraries are for them. But we have lots of services actually that fit their needs, because we also have lots of maker workshops, creativity workshops, stuff like that. So we wanted to find out how could we somehow learn something about what are their needs, but how to get in contact with the non-users. They started this design process and found out that we need to have some partners who know something about this user group. So they teamed up with, for example, unions. So we could see that lots of these non-users and non-readers, they were in the factories around the city. And how to get in touch with them, we talked to the unions and they said, yes, we know them and we can bring you together. So we learn a lot from talking to people that know them, and we found out that we could do different services for them where we could get them into the library. For example, we did some technical tours at Dock 1. So Dock 1 is a big building with lots of IT stuff and implemented in the building. So we did tours about the building, not about the library, but about this building and some of the things that they would be interested in. So that was lots of young guys signed up for that. And then after the tour, we started to talk to them about and present some of the other things that we have, some of the library service we have for them, to get some feedback about what they thought about that. And we did, for example, this very early prototype where we took all the services we had described on one card, one service, and then it was kind of pick and mix candy thing where they could like see all the services and they could then pick the services that they wanted to attend and then take them home. So it was another way of presenting, also because we know that most of them could, if they went to our website, they would probably quickly turn away again because it's difficult to find out what kind of services we have. So now it's kind of a service. They made this card a little bit more nice, and then they have this card box. So when they have tours for this type of users, we show them the library services. So that's just one example. We also use it very much at the branches. In Aarhus, we have these 18 branches that are very much like community centers. So we use design thinking as a way to find out how can we engage the communities in developing the branch libraries. So how can we co-create with them? How can we co-produce the library with the citizens in these areas? Invite them into different kinds of workshops and build prototypes with them. Created new formats where we could meet these users and have a new dialogue with them. We have these bikes and a small tuk-tuk car. So these mobile library devices that could also go around town and meet people to find out what are their needs. And at the same time, so we can do library. So it's not a physical library, but we do library when we go out with these things and meet the people where they are. So that's just a few examples of how we use design thinking in Aarhus. And just here at the end, a few design thinking learnings that we have had along the way. One is empathy is the secret sauce of a design thinking process. And we think it's very important to remember that design thinking is about involving the users, but it's not just about asking the users, what do you want? Because they don't know what they want. They can't actually, maybe they have some ideas, but they don't really know what they want. So empathy, this thing about going out, learning about the world, having long interviews with the users, this is what helps us to put ourselves in their shoes, to see what could be kind of the new services that they need at the library. So that's very important, a very, very important part of a design thinking process, to also to learn the tools. How can you gain empathy? How can you get and how can you understand the users even better? A second learning is that prototyping, yes, it is a very important driver of a design thinking process. And libraries we are lucky because they're perfect spots for prototyping. So we have the users, they come in every day, so it's very easy to take a prototype to the library space and test it out. And also at libraries, we don't have to keep our ideas as a secret. We can be open about the innovation work we do, and people very much would like to be a part of it. So every time we do it, it's like people would very much like to contribute and to give us their feedback. So it's a very good driver for a process. And even now, even though we have been doing design thinking for many years, we still have projects that ends up, sitting in a meeting room discussing, how would the young people think about this or this or this? And then suddenly, you realize after talking, after having a long meeting about that, why didn't we ask them? Why didn't we present some of this to the young people to get their feedback? So that's very important. And then the third thing is that you should hack it. Yeah, and it's meant to be broken. Design thinking process is it's a framework, and in the toolkit we have described a process that you could go through. You could go through these 3 phases. There are lots of methods that you could use, but after. And maybe the first couple of times, and maybe the first couple of years you're doing design thinking, you have to do this, like go through the process to get to know all parts of it. But after doing that, you should just adjust it to the needs that you have. You should hack it, you should break it and make it into your own. So I think that's very important, that you don't become too narrowed on this. Okay, we have to do this and this and this, and then we're done. No, you have to, after learning it, it's kind of become more like a toolbox where you can pull out the things you need to do according to whatever project you're doing, and you can add on new tools. So, for example, the thing about going out on bikes, talking to people, that's not kind of a core design thinking tool, but it's a way that our branch libraries, they came up with this idea that was what they needed to do. So hack it and make it your own. I think that's very important to remember. The toolkit has been a very important tool, as I said, for us to get a shared language about design thinking. It has also been very important for us to show to our partners and politicians, to show them that the library is actually, we're doing innovation work and we have this method. So it has helped us a lot to advocate for libraries throughout the city and also in the rest of the world. So in that way, it's very important, but it is thought of as a starting point. Yeah. So remember that libraries are for the people. So that's why, of course, we should use some human-centered methods to design libraries. And on design thinking for libraries, you can get all the stuff from the toolkit. We also have a Facebook where we try to share stories, but also on the website we are collecting stories from libraries all over the world who are using this approach. So if you do anything, or if you hear of a library that do something that we could share, then please reach out, and then we can help spread the stories to other libraries.
Excellent.
Yes.
Sidsel, we this morning, very early, at breakfast, we suggested maybe that Of course, there are people in the room with questions, but maybe we turn it around a bit at first, and you have a question for the audience?
I have a question, yes. So I would like to know if you were to start using design thinking in your work, could you tell me about one thing that you would start doing and what kind of support you would need to start doing it? So what would you do to get started on design thinking, and what would be the support or whatever you would need to start doing that?
All right, there's 2 mics in the room. I think Sahara has a mic over there, and I will go here. When you want to ask a question later on, please say your name and where you're from, where you work at. And if you want to answer this question, is there anyone that wants to answer this question? Yes, over there, I'll go there. I saw a finger here. No? Where would you start? What is your idea?
There was a finger up here. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for your nice story about everything. But I wondered, when you talk about we, does it mean that all the layers of the library are involved? And that brings me to my question, my answer for your question. If people in the lower layers of the library are very enthusiastic about design thinking and innovation, what I think you need a very safe support from your superiors.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how your library arranged this?
Yeah. That's a very good point, because I think that the support from the management is very, very crucial when you want to do this, because otherwise it will be maybe you can get the ideas, but how to implement it if you don't have the support. But the way it has been done in Aarhus, I think we have had the luck to have a management who, right from the start, they came up with the vision about, we're building a new library and it's a library for people. So they were kind of the advocates for this approach. And our former manager, he was always like, remember now, we are here for the citizens. This is their library, so we have to use these methods. So he was very like supporting and also telling you stories about why we should use this approach. So I think it's very important when you're a manager at a library that want to do this, that you create these stories.
But what I mean is the relationship between the employer and the employee, because it's you take a risk when you go on an innovation path. Was there a safe culture for this step for the employees?
Yes, exactly, and I think we built up that culture through many years. And the picture I showed at the beginning with the transformation lab at the old main library, we had this lab going on for many years, and that was a lab for prototyping and testing out. And I think that helped us create this culture of where. Also where we could fail and test out things and try out whatever without no one saying that this is not a good idea, and the management supported that, say, well, do you have an idea? We have a lab, test it out, fail, and then at one point we also had this thing about celebrating mistakes. So we actually had this game about where you should. Yes, I made a mistake every time you made a mistake. And they supported that. So that was kind of creating that culture of where mistakes are okay, you should fail because that's the only way you could learn. So that's kind of built into the whole culture now.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah, but it takes time, and of course you will find it's not. There are lots of struggles, so it's not like in Aarhus we use this approach, yes, but of course there are lots of things along the way that are difficult and create some discussions. But I think the thing about everyone could test out things and everyone can do these prototypes, that's kind of built in now, but it took many years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Questions from the audience? There must be questions. Yes, I'll have one here, sir. Please say your name and where you're from.
My name is Cor Wijn, and I'm working as an advisor in the cultural field. Thank you for your interesting talk. I'd like to say that in the first place. I would like to know, in Holland, sometimes we start these design thinking processes with, of course, talking with the people, but also talking with other organizations in the local society. To find ways to make combinations, new combinations, and also trying to find another position for the library, working together with sometimes completely other organizations that are normally active in this cultural field. And I was wondering, did you also try that in Aarhus?
Yeah, that's also very interesting. This whole thing about partnerships, that's a whole other story of our innovation process, because that has also been very important, because we could see when we started the process towards the new main library it's a very huge building and we could never fill it up with activities on our own. So we have had for many years like a partnership strategy, bringing in partners to do stuff with us and also to get the things out of the library. So it's a very important part of the way we work, and it's also something that we often build into the design process. So sometimes it's partnerships where we go out and have meetings and talk to partners about how could we cooperate, but we could also do like see them as users. So like when we meet end users, we go to their home, but we could also go like we did with the unions in the non-readers project, go to the partners and do interviews with them to figure out what is on their mind, what do they want, what do they see of new trends and perspectives in their field, and how can we then make some connections to libraries, or maybe not. So that's another way that you could approach it, like see them as users and or see them as experts in their fields, and then interview them and bring that into the design process.
One more inside.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Karen Zaal. I'm from Dutch Parliament, Library of Dutch Parliament. One of your slides said empathy is the source, and I was really triggered by that because I think it's very true. And you said you have to go and talk to people who don't know what they want. Now, our clients are a particular kind of clients, the members of Parliament. They don't have much time. Do you have a secret ingredient for those kind of interviews for us?
Oh, it's a good question.
The members of Parliament are listening.
Yeah. But I think some of the secret ingredients is to be very curious and to keep asking why and why and why. Because we often tend to take things for granted. Also, when we work with other professionals, it could also be partners. So when they say something, we're like, oh yeah, we understand that, and then let's move on. But we try to encourage ourselves to stay curious and stay like seeking for things, new things, and that's also why you have to keep asking why, because otherwise you miss things. So I don't know if could be a secret ingredient for those kind of users, but still it's like I think that's what inspired us a lot when we worked with IDEO, how curious and how much they just keep looking for things. They dig much deeper than we have ever done. So I think that's what a designer is good at. It's like looking behind what people do and try to figure out what is exactly going on here. So that's I think that's very important. Yeah.
Okay, I have one more last question, of course. I know in Aarhus, there are two more questions basically. Yeah. You have an innovation department that is about 100 people.
Yes. That's what we have.
About 100 people.
Yeah.
It's big. Well, I mean, we would be like blown away by that, and most libraries would be, of course. But it's not for the library; it's for the whole city. It's for everyone, every cultural institution. How do they relate to this process? Do they communicate? Of course, they communicate. How does that line work? If something comes up from the floor, tests in the lab or outside, and it comes back, how does this relate to each other? This huge department and the people on the floor.
Yeah, but the thing in Aarhus is that you could say that we have a huge department, but you could also say that we don't have a huge department of innovation workers, because we actually like to think that all of us
are in the department.
Yeah, so that's kind of built into to the whole organization, that it's part of the way we work. And I think that's also part of the reason why we managed to change that culture, because otherwise it would be like, you know, one smaller group who was just running in that direction. Yeah. We could have had that. We could have come up with lots of different services, but it's not like then it would have no ownership in the organization. So that's also why I think we managed to create that change.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Are the 100 the innovation department, is that a real separate department?
No.
Or is it like, because you said everyone can be a designer, so
yeah.
is it like over the whole organization you have people
it's
from every
yeah, it is. In the libraries, in part of the organization, it's we don't have like an innovation department, because we like to think of everyone as part of this. So, and of course, it's not like everyone are doing this all the time, but we have like different layers. So we have everyone should know about the toolkit and the framework and how you do it, and have been through different workshops. And then there's a next layer called we call them ambassadors. So they are design thinking ambassadors. That's around 20 people, so they know a little bit more, but they're not like doing projects on their own. They're from different teams, so they're just knowing a little bit more, and they can facilitate workshops for other libraries as well. And then there's core teams of experts, like 5 people who have been through the whole thing and are really good at it. But they're not like doing that. They're working in different parts of the organization, so it's not like they're sitting over here doing design thinking and then bring something to the rest of the organization. It's kind of built into everything. Yeah.
You have to go there and work there for a month, then you understand it. It's not easy to explain right here. Yeah. Sidsel, thank you so much. And she will be here during lunch. There will be a lunch after this. And lots of people will come up to you and ask you questions then, I think.
Please do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.